Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. New York is not only warming twice as fast as the rest of the world, but it's also drowning twice as fast. This has been confirmed by the prestigious New York Academy of Sciences. They say that the oceans around New York City are rising nearly twice as fast as the average for the rest of the world. And according to them, sea level rise rates are just about to massively accelerate upwards and drown Lower Manhattan. But the current data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration tide gauge at Lower Manhattan tells a completely different story. There's been no acceleration in sea level rise, and sea level is below their most conservative scenario. I overlaid the NOAA graph on top of the New York Academy of Sciences graph, and it shows this very clearly. The predicted apocalypse in New York City simply is not happening. Sea level at Lower Manhattan is rising at the same rate now as it was when Abraham Lincoln was president. And in fact, we're seeing the same thing at all 20 of the tide gauges operated by NOAA in the northeastern United States. This animation cycles through the entire collection. The apocalypse which experts are predicting is just not happening. And this paper from the Journal of Ocean Engineering and Science explains what's really going on in Manhattan. Most, if not all, of the apparent sea level rise in Lower Manhattan is actually due to the land sinking rather than the oceans rising. Sea level rise is less than 1 millimeter per year, or less than 1 meter per 1,000 years. And this is consistent with other tide gauges along the east coast of North America. There's very little sea level rise, but since the end of the last ice age 20,000 years ago, the land along the east coast has been sinking. You would think that the New York Academy of Sciences would be aware of this fairly fundamental fact, but apparently they aren't. In 1988, NASA's leading climate expert James Hansen predicted that Lower Manhattan would be underwater within 20 or 30 years, no later than 2018. Obviously that didn't happen, but 200 years ago Lower Manhattan actually was underwater for a while. The most powerful hurricane to hit New York hit in 1821. Fortunately, it came in at low tide, but had it come in high tide like Hurricane Sandy, it would have devastated Lower Manhattan. Even though the 1821 hurricane came in at low tide, the storm surge still flooded several blocks of the city. Let's finish this up by discussing this ridiculous claim from the New York Academy of Sciences. Their claim that sea level is rising twice as fast as the global average makes no sense. All of the oceans are connected and water seeks a level surface. If sea level rises 1 foot in one place, it's going to have to rise pretty close to 1 foot every place else. It's possible to have minor differences in the rate of sea level rise at different locations for short periods of time due to differential thermal expansion or to wind. But these anomalies can't last for very long. Bodies of water can't mound up. Ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, if sea level rises 1 foot in one place, it's going to have to rise pretty close to 1 foot every place else. The reason we see differences in tide gauges is because they don't actually measure the rate of sea level rise. Tide gauges measure the rate of sea level rise relative to the land, but the land can be moving as well. It's like when you're sitting on a train at the train station. Sometimes it's very difficult to tell whether it's your train that's moving or whether it's the other one. Tide gauges suffer exactly the same problem. Is the ocean rising or is the land sinking? Is the ocean falling or is the land rising? There's no way to determine this from a tide gauge alone. Without a global positioning system, you'll never really know what's going on. In the northeastern United States, the land is sinking much faster than the oceans are rising. It is unfortunate that the prestigious New York Academy of Sciences doesn't seem to understand basic science. Or it could simply be due to what Upton Sinclair explained. It's very difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on these scamsters and frauds for the past 13 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at RealClimateScience.com.